Listening and responding. Wait, now, isn't listening the same as hearing? No, listening is a process. It's a process of receiving, attending to, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken or nonverbal messages. So, what does that entail? What is hearing and how does it differ? Hearing is the process of sound waves striking the eardrum and causing vibrations. Listening, on the other hand, occurs when the brain reconstructs these electrochemical impulses and gives them meaning. So, hearing is just the first step, and it can be influenced by a lot of different factors: temporary hearing loss, fatigue, and a number of other things. And it is just the first step in the process. More than 13 million people communicate with some sort of hearing impairment, whether that is an intense one or a very minor one based on illness or swimmer's ear or the like. We all have to get past that very first step, and that's difficult. Now, attending is the next step. It's the psychological process of selecting what gets through. When we're bombarded with information, we have to choose what we listen to. We select or attend to specific pieces of information. When you look at these images, what sticks out? What did you attend to? If it was me, I would say that the first thing that stuck out was this dog right here. I'm a big fan of dogs, and it's kind of in the middle, so that may have been one of the things that got prevalent to me. But what stuck out to you? Maybe you're a cat person. Maybe you're into soccer or baseball. Maybe your career field is going into a medical field. Maybe you are an artist. All of those things might impact you based on your own experiences. Now, when you look at this, attending to information is something that can be more difficult or more impactful than you might realize. Because once you have chosen which of the things to focus on in your environment, you begin to listen to the details of that message. The needs, wants, desires, and interests determine what of that you're going to pay attention to. So take a look at this picture here. When you look at this picture, what do you see? You see a teacher teaching what looks like math on a very traditional teacher board, a blackboard, not the digital one, but the literal blackboard. And it looks like there's lots of primary colors. It's very simplistic. Now, if you look at this picture, you see a lot more intricate patterns. You might notice certain things first. Maybe the guy playing the guitar is what sticks out initially to you, or the flames behind the guy or girl. But did you see the skull at the bottom, or the flames down below, or the ladies on the side? These things may not stick out to you as much, or maybe they're the first things that stuck out to you. So once you decide which of the things to pay attention to, then you start to hone in on the details. Now, what can be affected by what we select and attend to? Do you remember the idea of noise? Noise, whether it's psychological, physiological, any kind of noise, or external noise, just being loud, or your computer screen is too dark so you can't see things as clearly. All of those can impact what you attend to and why. Now, once you have attended to the information, you have to try to understand it. What understanding is what occurs when we make sense of the message. And what can we infer with our understanding? What can we assume? We make those decisions. We decide what we want to know and understand about what we've attended to. What does it all mean? And what can you do that will increase effective understanding? First, try to avoid assumptions and prejudging as much as possible. Now, you want to relate information to your own experiences, but not in a way that says you will feel this way or you do think these things. Instead, just try to avoid assumptions that universally apply emotions to a person. Instead of doing that, ask yourselves, okay, well, how would I feel? And is it likely that they're going to feel this way? And if they do, how can I confirm whether or not they're feeling like that? So ask questions. Paraphrase how they're feeling. Say back to them, look, you're raising your voice right now. Are you really upset about XYZ? Or is it this that's upsetting you? So paraphrase, ask questions to clarify and make sure what you are being told and what you are understanding is as correct as possible. And then once you've gotten to that point, you can respond. So generating some kind of feedback or reaction that lets others know that you have received and understood their message. And oftentimes this consists of giving the speaker observable feedback. That is what we call active listening. If I were to say that I'm an active person, I would mean that I am physically active, right? I exercise or run or what have you. Active listening can be thought of in that way. An active listener is physically present within the speech or within the communication. So they may lean forward, might nod their head, maintain eye contact, and such. Because listening is not a passive activity. It's a process and it involves quite a bit of interaction. Passive listening, also another form would be called pseudo-listening, is basically sitting there and not giving feedback. So absorbing information or giving false feedback by nodding, saying, yeah, I know, when you don't know. You are not actually retaining anything. Now, can you use some of those things, the I see, I know, as a way to increase effective responding? Well, yes, if you do it right, if you do it as a form of support and not as a form of pseudo-listening. Also, be honest. Be as straightforward as you can in that moment and own your responses. Consider the idea of I language and you language. Don't say you feel or you think or you are. Instead, go back to that paraphrasing, that asking of questions, and own what you say. If you make a mistake, own up to it. And resist always trying to solve the problem. Now, there is that stereotype that women want somebody to listen and men want to solve the problem. While that may not be the case, in any circumstance, you may want to just wait for a question when you are listening to someone before you start offering advice. And it could be a simple question like, can you believe that? Well, then, yeah, maybe you want to offer some advice there. I can't. Did you ever do this? What do you think of this? So use that moment to kind of interact with your partner in that communications instance. And you don't always have to solve the problem, but in some cases, if you just wait for a question, that might be your opening to try and participate in the resolution. Now, once you have solved the problem or just heard them out in order to make them feel like they're a part of the communication, you have to be able to accurately remember or recall what was said. And that is much more difficult than you might think. I mean, think about how you remember a lecture. How do you remember what I say in a lecture? There's a ton of information in each of these lectures. How do you retain that information? Do you take notes? Do you listen to it over and over again? What do you do? How do you attain directions? How do you practice and remember material for a speech? If you think about it, the ability to recall information is quite difficult. Typically, we remember about 50% of what we hear immediately after hearing it. So the second this lecture is over, you will have forgotten half of what I said. And then within 8 hours, so by the time you go to bed, you will remember only 35% of what I said. And then in a few months, when you're done with the course or you're done learning about this material, you will remember only 25% of what I said. So the key is, how much do you remember, and are you remembering accurately? Now, it is something we need to work on. It's something that you should really focus on trying to be good at, because we struggle significantly with remembering and remembering accurately. Yes, you can identify main ideas, summarize, or repeat, but let's go back to the idea of asking questions, of paraphrasing things. So you said blank. That made me think that you meant blank. And not only are you increasing your understanding with that, but you're also kind of restating the information and hopefully retaining it a little bit better. Now, it sounds easy, but it's actually not. Take a minute, and I want you to grab a piece of paper and do this activity with me. So pause the video right now and go grab a piece of paper. Okay, now that you've got your piece of paper, I'm going to give you a list of words, and then I'm going to say go and have you pause the video for 60 seconds and try to write down as many of the words that you remember. Okay, so here we go. You've got your pen, you've got your pencil or your piece of paper. Here we go. I'm going to give you a list of words. Bed, rest, wake, night, eat, slumber, sound, snore. Okay, pause the video, write down as many of these as you can do. Okay, so hopefully you have taken about 60 seconds or so to write down as many as you can come up with. Look at your list. Did you have the word bed in there? That was the first word I said. Did you have the word snore in there? That was the last word I said. If that's the case, you are fulfilling, the theory of primacy recency. You remember that which comes first or that which is most recent. Now look at your list again. Did you write the word sleep in there anywhere? Most people, at least half of those that participate in an activity like this, write the word sleep, but I never said sleep. You remembered something falsely. You remembered me saying sleep and put that on your list because you associated sleep with all of those words. So in some cases, we have these false memories that we create that end up causing us to believe certain things to be true that never actually happened, because either we associate our feelings or experiences with other things, and therefore we interject these ideas and values and opinions, and we say that something happened that didn't actually happen. So remembering can be quite a difficult task. Why don't we listen better in the grand scheme of things? I'm just going to quickly go over some of the reasons we struggle. One, the amount of speech encountered makes it nearly impossible to listen carefully to everything. Message overload. If you didn't have this lecture recorded, you would need to be recording it live and re-listening to it over and over because there's a lot of material in here. Preoccupation. Personal concerns tend to take precedent, and it's difficult to listen when you're worried about other things. Rapid thought. We're actually capable of understanding 600 words per minute, but the average person speaks 100 to 150 words per minute. If you've ever been listening to a speaker, try in your head, not out loud, to say the words they're saying along with them. We typically can do that because we think so much faster than a person can speak. It's very fascinating. I've caught myself doing that a few times. Almost makes you feel clairvoyant, but you're not. Another reason that we don't listen better is because it's hard work. If you're tired, listening can be problematic. It takes a lot of effort. Remember, it's not just hearing. It is multifaceted. It is a complex process. Sometimes it's just external noise. Outside distractions can be difficult to ignore. Even temperature can cause poor listening. If you're very hot or very cold, that can impact how you retain information. And also faulty assumptions. We tend to believe we're listening attentively when we're actually not. Or we're listening attentively at first, but then our mind wanders and we don't realize it. And then when a subject is familiar, it's easy to tune it out. If you expect a topic and if you expect information to go a certain way, then sometimes you tune out that information. So what can we do? How do we listen better? Constructing meaning in formal situations is the key. Look for key ideas. What is the person trying to get you to do or think? What is the goal of the person that you are listening to? Whether that be a best friend, a teacher, other authority figure, a parent, what have you. What do they want from you when they are talking to you? What is it they would like to achieve? And what are their arguments? How are they doing it? How are they making their arguments? Are their arguments very logical? Are they laying out the details and giving you evidence and proof? Or are they just spouting emotions? Now, emotions are great, but they're only a support material for logic. They are not good for themselves. They are not what you would use to make arguments alone. Anecdotal evidence, meaning your own personal experiences, and emotions alone do not make a strong argument. So look at your arguments. Look at the person who's speaking to you. Try to understand what it is they're saying and why. And watch for those emotional biased arguments and responses. Make sure that you are getting a combination that relies mostly on logic and may throw in some emotion as another form of support. And another way that you can do it in terms of response is to offer that offer that feedback that we mentioned earlier. So paraphrasing, you said blank, and that led me to think you meant blank. So you're offering this feedback by stating their action and how it made you feel or what it made you think of. That way you can not only clarify, but you can also make sure that they got out what they were intending to get out and you retain the information. You might also consider the Socratic method. And the Socratic method is basically continually asking open-ended questions in order to understand the base beliefs, values, and arguments of a person. It sounds almost like I'm telling you to be militant and say, well, why do you think that? Tell me more. What do you mean? What do you mean? It's not that. The Socratic method asks them to dive deep into their logic, dive deep into their reasoning. So if they say to you, I think we should move to Wyoming, you say, what is it about Wyoming that is enlightening or exciting for you? Let them explain. Well, I want to move to Wyoming because the weather's better. Can you tell me a little bit about the weather? So ask them questions that lead them down the path to constantly giving more and more feedback and more information. And be careful, because again, sometimes the emotional arguments or the statements can be blatant, outright lies. And you want to use a Socratic method and feedback loops to guarantee as much as possible that what you're hearing is accurate. Now, a while back, there was an infographic that came up via the internet that was quite interesting, and I wanted to share that with you here. This infographic is a color representation of some various political people in the past that have made statements that were either found to be completely true, mostly true, half false, mostly false, completely false, and obvious lying. And if you see the way this is all laid out, you can kind of tell who did what type of information processing, who gave certain language choices, who chose to deliberately lie, and who chose to speak much of the truth as much as possible. So it's kind of interesting to see where it all kind of lies. This is not something that is universal every year, but at this one time, it was in 2016, early 2016. This was a very interesting way of finding out kind of how our messages are relayed. It sounds so real and true and accurate right at the beginning, but the further you question, the more the Socratic method you use, the more you find out. So hopefully that'll give you some good stuff to think about in terms of listening, its process, its challenges, and some of the things that we have to keep in mind in order to make sure we are listening effectively.